Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today, Masechtas Baba Kama Daf Yud Beis. We're going to begin on Yud Beis Omad Aleph, the third line from the top. Havi Uvda ben Arda. There was a incident that took place in Narda, Ba'agvu Dayani de Narda, and the Dayanim collected over there. Havi Uvda bePumbedisa ve'agvi Rab Chana bar Bizna. And he collected. Armahu Rav Nachman Zil Hadru. You should go and return that which you took. Vilo Magbinanochu La'apandaichu. If you don't, then we're going to take it from your palaces. So apparently this was not correct. Because as we saw in yesterday's daf, that if, let's say, you have an Eved, which has a poteki, in which when you borrowed money, you said that you can collect from my Eved. This is where your collection is from. And now you want to collect it, and let's say, for example, it was sold, the Eved, I should say, was sold. So in that situation, because there's a coal, you can take it away, even if it's Yisayimim. So this is a whole question if, in fact, this was correct. So, as Rashi says, over here, Hachi Omer Belezer Phil Biasmi, the Avdi Kimikarkai Dami, that actually, because an Eved is like Karka, so therefore there is a Shibud on him, and therefore, if there's a loan, you can collect from him. It doesn't make any difference if it's in the Yisayimim's hands. And usually we're much more lenient when it comes to Yisayimim. But over here, we're saying no. You have to return it. Okay. Amalei Rabbi Rav Nachman Ha'ula Ha'Rabbi Elazar. You look on the top line. Amal Hu'ula Hachi Amar Rabbi Elazar Fil Miasmi Ha'Daini Ben Arda V'Ha Rav Chan Bar Bizna. So we have all these opinions that support that you can take it. So Mar, that you say that an Eved is like Metaltalin. Kamat Svirle. Who do you hold like? Amalei Ana Masnisi Adana. I know the following statement. The Tani Avimi, he learned the following. Pruzbul. As Rashi says, this is actually explained, as we saw not too long ago, Maseches Gittin, that Hills Masakin a Pruzbul in order that loans should continue to be collected. There's an issue that we know there's an issue of Loyigois, that if you owe money, so there's Shmitas Ksofim, that you don't collect those loans, the Shmitas Meshamit. The problem is a very huge economic problem. People stop giving out loans, knowing that there was a very good chance Shemitah is going to come before they collected their loans back, and they're not going to get their money. So Pruzbul was created by Hillel, and Pruzbul is Chal ala Karka. It's only Chal if the person owns land, and the Gemara over there, Rashi over there said, because they're only Masakin something which is Milsa the Shliach, the Enu Chal Avadim. It's not Chal on Avadim. So what do we see straight there, if we're making a distinction between an Eved and Karka, obviously an Eved is not like Karka. Eved is like Metaltalin, and therefore there's no encumbrance, there's no lien on movable properties, movable items rather, and therefore you have to give the Eved back. Metaltalin nikdin im karka, vein nikdin im ha'avadim. Another distinction, that when it comes to the din of Kinyan Agav, which we saw in Kedushin, also not too long ago, so if you're kind of the karka, so anything that's, let's say it's on the land, whether you need Siborin, the Gemara says you don't, but let's just keep it simple. You have a couch inside of on a property, so that's metaltalin. So once you're kind of the karka, you're kind of metaltalin. Obviously, it's more complex than that, but this is the posh explanation. That's called the kinagav. And nigdan im havadim, but it doesn't work with avadim. Says Rashi, shim hichsek ba'avadim. If you made a chazaka with an Eved, lo kan metaltalin, that doesn't mean you get metaltalin. So you can't do kinyan agav with an eved, but you could do it with a karka. So again, Rashi says, Alma avdikim metaltali. There's another proof, just like we saw by Prusbul, so too by kinyan agav, we see it's not, must be that karka, that an eved is like metaltalin. So lemekit tanoi. Let's say this whole thing is actually a matter of a machlokas among Tanoim. Macho avadim v'karkois. Let's say you sold slaves and land. So hichzik ba'avadim lo kana karkois, v'karkos lo kana avadim. If you're kind of one, it doesn't mean you're kind of the other one. Karkois metaltalin. If you're kind you want to get land and movable objects, hichzik b'karka kana metaltalin. Metaltalin lo kana karka. So it's interesting. You can't do a kinyan agav with land to an eved, but you could land to metaltalin, which then itself almost sounds like avadim do not have the same status as metaltalin. It sounds like avadim really have the status as karka. Avadim metaltalin. Let's say you have avadim metaltalin. Hichsba avadim lo kana metaltalin, metaltalin lo kana avadim. V'asanya, and we learn elsewhere. Hichsik bavadim kana metaltalin. We learn the opposite. It's a stira. Over here we say that if you're kind of avadim, you could be kind of metaltalin, which sounds like why must be because avadim is like karka, and therefore just like karka can be kind of metaltalin, and eved can be kind of metaltalin. So which means that avadim is like karka. So my lab hakmifli must be this is the machlokas. The mar sabra avadim kimekarkoi dami. The mar sabra avadim kimetaltalin dami. So you see takas machlokas tanoim what the status of an eved is. Amrav ikabarei rav ami no the kuliyam avadim kimekarkoi dami. Really, an eved is like land, and therefore it makes sense why you would say that you could do a kinyan agav with an eved to metaltalin. It's hard to understand why you would say you can't. V'hadasanya kana shopper. The fact that you can do a kinyan agav with an eved to metaltalin, that makes sense. V'hadasanya lokana, here, why not? If it's like karka, the key word is it's like karka, because be'inan karka dumi da'arim matsurais bihuda doi naidi. It has to be comparable to the cities that are fortified in Yehuda, which are not movable. In other words, there is obviously a difference, maybe in certain halakhic aspects. An eved is like karka, but it's not really land, because a person, like an eved, moves, is 90. The only way you can do a kinyan agav is with karka, which is the loy nadi, which is like arim b'tsurais b'Yehuda. Ditnan nechasim shein lahem achrayis metaltalin. Nickname nechasim sheishu hem achrayis. You can be kinyan agav karka because of b'shar v'chazak in those three ways. So this is a beferish gemara in kedushin. So how do we know this? They gave him gifts, rabbis, great gifts, so kesevel, zahav, umigdanois, im ari b'tsuros b'Yehuda. So we see that the pasuk, the raya of learning that there's a concept of kinyan agav, is this pasuk in Divrei Yomim that says the karka was not just regular karka, was mitsunos b'Yehuda, and therefore that's what's necessary, and therefore that disqualifies avadim. Really, an evidence like metaltalin. Bahadasan look on a shopper. Makes sense that it doesn't work, right? Because it's metaltalin. Metaltalin you can't do kinyan agav. Metaltalin. Hadasan yikana. So how can metaltalin be kind of metaltalin? Ba'oiden alav, as long as it is on him. So normally, when it comes to land, it doesn't even need to be on it to be kind of metaltalin. You don't need siburim. However, when it comes to an eved, we will say that you can do a kinyan agav, but it actually has to be b'oiden alav, on the eved. V'chi oiden alav my havi. Why does that help? It's a moving courtyard. If he's standing still, if you can't be kind of while he's moving, also he's standing or sitting, and the Gemara says this in many places, the halach is that he is tied up, And Taisus brings down the Sar Choloimer Nami Demari Biyashin. The Kafois, he has to be tied up and he has to be asleep. So this Evid has a lot of stuff going on in his life. Fine. The Ilchus of Kafois. All right, let's hold off for 1 second and let's look at question 1. Hiksik ba'avadim lo kana metaltalin. Why not? Either because avadim is like metaltalin, or avadim is actually like karka. But as we said, it has to be comparable to Ari B'tsurais B'Yehuda. TB1. Gamadi Amar Avdi Kimataltalin Dami V'Nikda Agav Karka Ma Nafkamina B'Oifen Hakanim Ben Kaina Evid Ba'agav Ben Kaina Shar Metaltalin Ba'agav. So I wrote Ein Srichen Siburin Shema Metaltalin Ein Al Hakarka Afal Pikein Hakinin Moyel. It still works. Mashenkin in the Vadim Srichen Hamataltalin Leos Al Ha'eved B'Oidin Olav, in parentheses, Leos Achal Hakinin Shal Agav. I think it's pretty well written for an American boy. Pretty well written. Okay. So it's Ba'oidin Olav. And perhaps I could have added also B'Kafois, etc. Okay. That was TB1. All right. Fighter. V'hasanya. Okay. Hiksik b'karka kanavadim. If you make a karka, kinyan with karka, you can acquire the slave. Hasam over there is ba'oimdin mitoicha, is where the slave is on the land itself. And the case before it said it didn't work is where the Eved is not on the land. As what Rashi says, but the Gemara says it here, must be, why can you not be koine the Eved while it's with the karka while he's not on it? If an Eved is like metaltalin, so it needs to be on it, if not. It's like land. Why does that have to be there? Shmuel, as Shmuel said, again, this is all Kedushin, you sold 10 different properties in 10 different fields in 10 different provinces. Once you're kind of one, you're kind of all of them. So even if the land is far away, so that obviously land is not on top of land. So why, if the Eved is not there, why should that matter? Just like if an Eved is like karka, so karka, you can be kind of, once you do a chazak on one field, you're kind of all the fields. What I mean, still, it doesn't make sense to you. Why do you have to be? Does the Eved have to be standing on the land by metaltalin? As we mentioned, Yud Beis and Mid Beis. Hakaimu and Deloy be in Siburin. Metaltalin does not need to be on the land. We pass him like that in Kedushin. The reason why, what you're going to say, yeah, you're right. Normal metaltalin, like a stove or a couch, if it's not on the land, you can still be kind of aga because it doesn't move. But an Eved has to be on the land in order for kinyan agav to work. As it's metaltalin, but it's 90, it's moving. So it's the same thing when it comes to karka, on Eved, which we're calling karka, but since he moves, you need to actually be on the land. Avda mikarkoi tinaidi hu. So hasam sanad arachadhu. When we're dealing with all these pieces of property, even if it doesn't look like they're touching, but they're all part of this beautiful place called Mother Earth. So all the earth, on some level, is indirectly touching itself, which is an interesting svara. So therefore, if you're kind of one field, you can be kind of all the other fields. Once you make a chazak on one field, you're kind of the other fields. That's only because it's not 90. However, when it comes to an Eved, since he's moving around, that he actually has to be on the land. Okay. Now we discuss the next part of our Mishnah. It has to be nechasim she'en behen me'ilah b'chul. We're dealing with, you did a damage on something in which there's no din me'ilah. Me'ilah is when you derive hana from hektish. So it has to be something which is more chulin based, not hektish based. Me'ilahu deleis bahu hamikdash kadshi. Now, it sounds like there's no me'ilah, but it could still have some element of kedusha. What does that mean? Says Rashi, me'ilahu debi'inan toy lahavi lahu bahu menachasim shani chai ben nezakin. So it has to be something which there's no din nezikin, no din me'ilah, in order to be chayav for damages. But why does he use that language of me'ilah? Maybe we can make an inference. Says Rashi, leisahu me'ilah. If let's say there's no punishment of a me'ilah, afagav the mikdash kadshi ani chayim nezakin. Even if let's say somehow you can find something which there is a din kedusha on it, but if you would derive hana on it, there's no me'ilah, you would be chayiv. What would be that example? So Rashi says, the Gemara is going to say it too, kadoshim kalim. We're dealing with kadoshim kalim, like a shlomim, bechor, pesach, shein behen me'ilah, machayim. As the animal is still alive, even though it was designated as a carbon, but since it's kadoshim kalim, so there's no din me'ilah on it if you plowed with it while it was alive, for a second. The only time it's us there's a din me'ilah is after we already did the process of bringing the shchita and the carbon, the zrika, and its sacrificial parts, etc. So this is not necessarily a question, but it's a diuk from our Mishnah. So let's see this again. Me'ilah hu deleis bahu hamikadish kadshi zomantana Rabbi Yochanan b'kadosh kalim Rabbi Yosef Glili and Rabbi Balam hu. We know Rabbi Yosef Glili says kadshim kalim Rabbi Balam. Nice little rhyme. It's something in which, even though obviously it's a carbon, but nonetheless it has a connection to people, and therefore it says Rashi v'shor e'u kridan bei. As we constantly made this drasha, it says shor e'u lo shor shel hektish, but not when we're dealing with Kadashim Kalam, because it's considered Sharehu, because Kadashim Kalam is Maman Balam, it's like yours. The Sanya, as we learn the following. And the Pasuk says, that you did a trespass against Hashem. The Pasuk says, so you had a safekeeping by you, and someone says, okay, you have my pikadon, and you make a shvu against it. So on this, the pasuk says, "Mo Hashem, Ramos Kadashim Kalam Shehin Mamoinai, Div Rabbi Yosef Glili," which means that even if someone, for whatever reason, gave you a carbon, a Kadashim Kalam, and Rashi chooses a shlomim, and you give it to your friend, and then you say, "Okay, please have my carbon shlomim back? I actually want to bring it." And it's alive and well in the person's rishus, and the guy basically denies that he has it. And he swears to the fact, and afterwards he admits that he lied. So the din is he has to pay Karen, he has to pay back the principal, the price of that animal. Chaimish, he also has to add an additional fifth, and he also brings an asham me'ilois. Now, the truth is, we know when it comes to kachi shemayim, you don't make a shvu on those types of karbonis when it comes to shuas pikadon. But nonetheless, we do over here. Why? Because Kachim Kalam is Mam Balam. It's considered like the persons, and therefore all the dinim of Me'ilah apply to it. Okay. But non Hamikadish Bechelkai. If a person is Mekadish a woman with the pieces of this carbon, which means obviously it was after the Shechita, because it was cut up already, Bein Bekachi Kadashim, Bein Bekadashim Kalam, Ein Bekadashas. So it's not a good kedushin there. So we see maybe this is Lamdel Rabbi Yosef Glili, because Rabbi Yosef Glili says that Kadashim Kalam is yours. So why can't you be Mekadosh and Isha with it? So Fieltim Rabbi Yosef Glili already saw this in Rashi the Pshat. Kim Rabbi Yosef Glili Mechayim. The only time it's yours is while it's still alive, because you're achroi on it. Avalach Shchita. However, after this Kadashim Kalam has already been shechted and the Imorim were presented in the Zrikas Adam, in that situation, I feel Rabbi Yosef Glili Maida. Even Rabbi Yosef Glili will agree that it's not yours. What do you mean? If it's not yours, then how could the Kohanim be eating it? The fact that the Kohanim eat from these karbanos, the Kohanim eat the chazan, the shaykh of the shlamim, and again, we're talking about a person also eats shlamim, right? You don't have to be a kohen. Even the person who has the shlamim brought on his behalf, a non-kohen eats part of the shlamim. But the baalim who eats the rest of the meat, it's not his meat. He's eating mishulchan gavoya. He's eating from a Kadosh Baruch Hu's meat. Okay. So that is how we understand this. Okay. So again, there's a chilik between when, according to Rabbi Yosef Glili, only Rabbi Yosef Glili holds that Kedoshim Kalm is mumbalim as long as the animal is alive. But after it's shechted, he even agrees, which is why the Dik and the Gemara Kedushin points out on the language of this Mishnah is a mekadosh bechelkoi. It's that you didn't mekadosh her with the living animal. Maybe if you actually gave a woman a carbon shlomim, a live animal, and said this was already designated as a shlomim, maybe a taka would be a good kedushin, according to Rabbi Yosef Glili. The Mishnah over there says bechelkoi, which means it was already in pieces, which obviously means it was shechted and everything was done already. Okay. So the Gemara says like this: Mi Omar, umachai mi Omar. When it's this animal's alive, this kadoshim kalim, do we really say that it belongs to the owner? But to not bechor. Now bechor is also kadoshim kalim. But what's the din? Moichrenoiso tam chai. You can sell it as long as it doesn't have any blemishes and it's alive. Says Rashi, and this is Bizman Azeh, nowadays, and the Kohanim Moichon Oisel Kohen, and you sell it to a Kohen, because you can't eat it. A Kohen can still eat it, so you give it to the Kohen. So you give it to him while it's a Tam and Chai. Ubal Mum Chai, if you give it to him with a blemish, as long as it's alive, V'shochot, or if it's shechted. Okay. Hold off, says Rashi, Tam Chai, it's alive and healthy. V'loikeach, and the one who buys it, Yamtin, he has to wait. Ad sheyipol bo mum. He has to wait until a blemish happens onto this bechor. Yishchatenu, then he can shecht it afterwards. Avol tamim shachet lo. But if the bechor still is a tam, if it does not have a balmum, then the person who purchased it is not allowed to shecht it yet. The eno takana el kfura. The only thing you could do with this bechor is bury it. The aser bahana to kadshim hashechutim bechutzu. It's like shchutei chutz because it's kadshim kalam. Now again, we live bizman hazeh. What we're going to do with it? So what we do is we wait until it gets a mum, and then afterwards you can shecht it. So again, we see bechor is one of the matnas kahuna. Is one of the gifts that is supposed to be given to the kohen, which is not mum and balim. So in the times of the Beis Hamikdash, even if it's alive, only will become a shlomim alive if it's a mum and balim. Okay, so let's see this. Now the Kohanim, once they get this, it's theirs. They can even Mekadosh woman with it. The only time we say that a Bechor, which is alive, is considered to be the owner of the Baal, as long as it's Tam, Lo Shanu El Bechor Bizman is only nowadays. There's no Beis Hamikdash. You can't be makrabit. So the Kohanim, while it's alive, the Kohanim have some connection to it. It was much Beis Hamikdash Kayim. When the time in which the Beis Hamikdash was around, the Chazilak Rava, which he could have been makriv, loy. In that situation, no. So again, in the time, so we're saying the only time that the Kohen has rights to it is only because there's no ability to be makar of it. But in the times of the Beis HaMikdash, even if it's alive, so you would have to wait again until it becomes a balmum, etc. Okay. So that's the distinction between Bizman Hazeh and Tam Beis HaMikdash. Avol Bizman sheBeis HaMikdash Kayim the Chazal Akrava Loy Veisvei Rav Rav Nachman Umomo B'Hashem Rabbis Kodashim Kalim Shein Mamoinoi de Rabbi Yosef Galili. So he said when it comes to Kodashim Kalim, we said before Rabbi Yosef Galili holds it's yours. Umeshani Ravina, and he answers B'Bechor B'Chutz Haaretz. Believed Rav Shimon. During the time of the Beis HaMikdash, in Chutz Haaretz, this is what it's referring to, this Bechor. The Believed Rav Shimon. Yomer Im Bo Tamimim, if you brought Tamimim, Yikarvu. Im Bo in. If you did it already, it's L'Chatchila. Loy. You did it is in. L'Chatchila Loy. Without L'Chatchila, says Rashi, El Yirad Shiat Stavu. You're not really supposed to L'Chatchila do this, but instead you're supposed to wait until it gets a mum. Says Rashi, the Hilkach, Kivan Delav Hakravakoi, Havi Mum and Koyin. Since it doesn't belong to the, it can't be brought as a carbon, so it becomes Mum and Koyin. Vim Isa, if it's true, says Rashi. If it's true, the Mechayim Rav Yossi, the Mum and Balamhain, that while its Kedoshim Kalam is still alive, it belongs to the owner, Kedetani Masnis, the Chayavan al Nizkon, that we said that you're going to be chayiv by kachim kalim that does damage or is damaged a lot while it's alive. He says it's yours while it's alive, as we continue to Aleph. Lishni Rabbi Yosef Galil harabanan. Why do we need to establish the case is like Rabbi Yehuda, but in Chutz La'aretz? Say it's always Momen Balim, even the times of the Beis HaMikdash. So Amalei Matanas Kahuna Ka'amrit Shani Matanas Kahuna Chikazach Meshulchan Gavah Kazachu. So again, you can't ask a kasha when it comes to Matanas Kahuna because that is again Matanas Kahuna, which is no, it's not theirs. It's the fact that they can eat it. It just belongs to them. It doesn't belong to them. It belongs to Hashem. Okay. Question 2. My hilchasa nafkalon. Midyam Rabbi Yossi Kedoshim Kal Mammon Balim, who, what's the halacha? Write 2 of 3 answers. The im hizik shoroi shor shlomim. If your ox damages a shore of shlomim, shel chaver chayav benizkov. That's 1. Second lo, the mekadosh bo mekadeshes. That you can be mekadosh a woman with it. The chayav Allah b'shvos hapikadon keren chaimish be'asham. They're going to be chayiv in those 3 things, Karen, Chaimish, and Asham, just like anything else. So basically we see that the Chiddush, Rabbi Yosef Galili, and the Halacha Nafkaminas are strong. That if there's damage, there's din of Chiyav Nezikin, you can be Mekadosh an issue with this type of an animal, and also there's a din of Shavuos Apikadain. Adkan.